So welcome to our third Thursday training here in April 2026. Can you believe it? Uh, we're going to open with prayer and then I'll introduce our presenter. So let's pray. Gracious God, you call us to be stewards, stewards of the earth, stewards of the blessings you shower upon us. And as members and leaders of churches, that means stewards of church property too, stewards of buildings and grounds through all the days of their lives, which for some of our churches is a lot. It's a lot. And we need help. We need help to be good stewards of buildings. We need insight and guidance. And so I'm grateful that within our denomination we have that help. Be with us today as we hear about taking care of our property and things to keep in mind. And may this help us indeed in our stewardship of all the good gifts you have entrusted to our care. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So today we have the joy of being joined and led by Ellie Johns-Kelley. She is our ministry relations officer here in Newcastle Presbytery. Um, Ellie, you've been doing this for over
12 and a
10
half
years,
years.
12 and a half. I knew it was more than 10. So she's got some experience in that hip pocket. So go ahead and take it away.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad to be with you folks today and those who are watching down the line, watching the recording as well. This is property checklist. How do you prepare for action? And I will be sending Cindy the PowerPoint as well as an actual PDF with the checklist that you can have to, tick off what you have, what information you have, and what you need to gather. So I'm trusting but there may be folks who don't know who the foundation is. And we are one of the 5 agencies of General Assembly. As you can see, I've not updated the slide yet. The Interim Unified Agency now has a name. It is Presbyterian Life and Witness. We have the Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program, Presbyterian Publishing, Board of Pensions, and then the Foundation. And we are the oldest and largest religious foundation in North America. I like to tell folks clearly our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters have their money in Vatican City and not here because they'd blow us out of the water. Um, but we are the oldest and largest religious foundation in North America, dating back to 1799. And we like to say that your mission is our mission. We only exist to be of resource to our congregations. And it all started with receiving gifts and bequests from pious Presbyterians for mission and ministry. That was our original purpose as the trustees of the denomination. And so we continue that today. And I work with churches with stewardship, plan giving, investment options. We know a little bit about property, and we'll work with churches um, thinking about just how do we have things in order, or if we're preparing to sell property, or we're wondering about our future. We do discernment work with churches. So know that all of this comes at no cost to you or your presbytery. This is our service to the church. So I'm so glad to be with you today. I am coming to you from Carmichael's, Pennsylvania, about an hour south of Pittsburgh. I live on a farm there with my family. So hopefully we don't have any little girls in the background, but if someone comes through, I am in my home office today. So um, they're out playing and hopefully just enjoying the weather outside. Oh no, no wonder I was having, oh no, this is right. Where our whole property checklist came from, I wasn't thinking about this slide, is when we started working with churches with Project Regeneration, a program we launched back in 2013 that really focused on property transactions, mergers, property sales, etc. And we've really developed this program that we do discernment work with churches now. But the with all that work we've done through the years, we have come to know a little bit about church properties. And so we have offered this to the mid-council leaders, and they found it so valuable in their conversations that we're rolling it out to share across presbyteries as well. Um, and so, as we think about that checklist, how do we gather information? How do we know about our property? Who knows about our property, right? Is it just the chair? Um, I would recommend that you work with the Mack truck theory, and two people know the information for everything. Everything from church passwords, keys, um, every detail of the life of the church. You really need Mack truck theory. If someone gets hit by a Mack truck, uh, will others know what to do? Will they have the information? The same goes with our property. So some very basics are document what is the church name? How is it not just known in the community, um, but how are you incorporated? Um, is that the same as what is documented at GA as well? It's fascinating. I'll work with churches and I may find a name three or four different ways. So, what is its proper incorporated name? Has that shifted over time from when perhaps your property was first purchased or uh, received as a gift, whatever it may be? Does that match your deed? Do you know what that is? What's your property address? Do you know the square footage of your building? How many acres it is sitting on? How many worship spaces do you have? Is it just the sanctuary? Do you have a sanctuary and a chapel? I even have some churches who have sanctuary chapel and an outdoor worship space. Being familiar with that. Is there a cemetery on campus? Or perhaps you have, my mind is going blank right now, for cremains,
Like a memorial garden
a
or
memorial garden, or, yeah, the other word is escaping
crematorium,
me. Crematorium. Yeah, yeah.
something like
Um, and are there any leases on the property? Are you renting out to groups, organizations, individuals? Um, do you have that documentation in a clear place in a file that others can get to if they need it, right? As we consider all this and we document this, really with the property health assessment, it's an opportunity for you to gather the overall picture on the history and current condition of your property. And it can be used both as a resource to build a complete picture of its current health. Do we have deferred maintenance? That's common with many of our churches. And we know, kind of like that, uh-oh, gotta get Mako. What it costs you today is a lot less than what it will cost you tomorrow, right? Maybe that's not Mako. Maybe it was a different ad, but I'm thinking an ad out of the 80s, right? But do we know the full health of the church? Can we also identify any impediments to future ministry plans? So some people go, oh my gosh, Ellie's talking to me about this because folks are thinking of selling our building. No, this is just good to know in general. However, if you ever go to sell your building, you really need to know that information at that time. And it's good not to have to scramble. So having it all together in one location that you can pull a file. And folks love putting everything on the cloud. Clouds are great. I think it's also good to have a physical file that you can get to so that golly, the wrong person does die or goes into the nursing home, you're able to access that information. So I think having a physical file is really useful as well. Um, so really, your property exists for mission and ministry. We like to say there are only three P's in a church budget: place, people, and program, right? Um, and that place only exists to do mission and ministry. So, how's it working for you? Is it still useful? Are there things you could do to upgrade it, whether it's accessibility, deferred maintenance, any number of things that make this property more useful for you? Or do you have some acreage that you're really not using and it is more of a labor? And maybe you can sell off a parcel or two that can give you more money for mission and ministry. There are a lot of different reasons you're looking at that property health assessment. But even if you're going to stay in this place for the next 50 years, it's good to have this information down. So, one of the big things that we look at first that costs so much are HVAC systems, right? HVAC or boiler system. I made the mistake of talking about boilers to a group of folks down in Florida, and it was a national event. And of course, the folks in the South didn't understand what I was talking about. They don't have boilers, but I think you're still far enough north. Some of your churches may have boiler systems, right? It just all depends on what models you're working off of. But, knowing what kind of system you have and what condition is it in. Um, and we would say good, regular maintenance, everything is in working order. Units and systems are less than 10 years old. Now, I want to give you a caveat. I served a church in Warren, Pennsylvania that had a boiler system. Our boiler system 15 years ago was 60 years old, right? But it was a really good system, right? Um, Folks might say, oh, it's old, it's not energy efficient. Quite honestly, anything we would have replaced it with likely would have broken down swiftly, right? Things do not age like they once did, right? And it was a system for which we could still get parts. And we had folks who could fix it, right? So the key is knowing, okay, making sure it's not one property person who knows how to handle the system. We had one church that had their boiler system hooked up to a computer with code written in the 1980s. The person died, and they had to spend a lot of money to get it recoded. When this was in Pittsburgh Presbyterian, when it got cold last November. So you just need to know these things. Is it good working order? So being older than 10 years doesn't mean it's bad, but it's knowing your system, talking with those who service it to make sure, yes, this is still a good, reliable piece of equipment to have. So, you just can't answer it just by age. You got to know what you have, right? Fair is you're able to address basic minor repairs. Unit systems are between 10 to 15 years old. Really, if we're talking a true HVAC system, we're probably thinking that time span in terms of true HVAC systems. And often with those, by upgrading those, we can find more efficiency. So it's good to think about. Poor would be units have major repairs. That would be the first thing I would say makes it poor. But also you may mark it poor if it's older than 15 years old. Again, more HVAC than boiler. With a boiler, you're going to know, is this a good piece to keep? And it's actually worth making sure we have regular maintenance to keep it in order. So it's about knowing your system as you grade it. Next thing you want to think about are windows, right? Um, and here again, we're looking at good, fair, poor. How are you marking them? Are they properly sealed based on the climate? Are there any visible signs of damage? If there's no visible signs of damage, we're going to give you a good check mark there. No, noticeable change in utility costs, no sign of airflow coming from windows. Fair, there's minor damage, change in utility costs, or sign of minor air flowing coming from the windows. Known damage to the windows would certainly give it a poor mark. Noticeable lack of sealing, airflow from windows, change in utility costs frequently. Now, I want you to think about, your main building, but if you have a manse, be thinking about those properties too. So I lived in a manse in Warren, PA, and we were right on 62 Market Street next to the church. And when semis went by, the windows shook, right? And I had just mentioned out loud to our session, if anyone wants to walk into the office and give the church a $10,000 or $15,000 gift, new windows would be awfully nice. Well, just putting that out there in the ether, a member of the church came forward And this couple gave the total amount to replace every window in the manse. And they were so excited. And they did it in September. And I took a new call in November. Every time they saw me at Price Terry afterwards, they gave me grief because they couldn't see the real cost savings, having consistent Ellie 1 year, Ellie another year, right? Um, but it really made a difference. I no longer heard those trucks going by. It was amazing how much more quiet that house was. But what that told me is it had better efficiency as well. So we weren't losing a ton of money to heat going out the windows. So it's good to know about those things too. And we could that former congregation, I could list all the different windows in I said not just the manse, I also said in the sanctuary building, and I could pick out rooms in our Christian Ed building and our sanctuary where I thought it would make a difference. So, as you think about your sanctuary, do you have stained glass windows? Yes or no? And what condition are they in? Good, fair, or poor? That's really important to pay attention to. I served one church just as sort of stated supply years ago, and we didn't worship in the sanctuary because their rose window was literally crumbling and falling into the choir loft, right? I was gutsy and I preached there on Easter Sunday, but I made sure no one sat in the choir loft, right? I thought I had enough distance away. But, you really need to be paying attention to that and documenting that, making sure that a few people know the state of this and can be aware so session can make some wise decisions on, what can we tend to now so it doesn't fall into great disrepair. As you think about your parking lot, I want you to think about what condition is it in? Is there grass growing in the cracks? Do you have potholes? Do you have clear painted lines on it? For good, we'd say it's sealed, your paint lines are visible, there are no potholes, there's no extreme wear and tear visible. A fair marking would be some visible potholes. Paint lines are faded. It's in functional condition, but sure, it certainly has wear and tear. We're going to need to be thinking about this. When we come to poor, there are potholes all over this sucker, right? They're present. No paint lines or markers. It's just not a safe condition. And so you want to be attentive to that. Also think about how many spaces do we have? Um, is it a parking lot? And what do we have for both parking lot and on-street parking? Um, we also want to think about other exterior surfaces, right? What is the condition of our sidewalks, our breezeways, our courtyards? This is all important as we get an overall picture of the property. And then we think about accessibility, right? Um, is all of the property ADA accessible, including the bathrooms? And I also want to say your chancel, is it accessible? Um, maybe not everyone's climbing into the pulpit, but do you have a chancel that folks can get up to, whether those are folks using a wheelchair or those using a cane, or other means of device to assist them. Often our churches, they might start dreaming of capital projects and even redoing their sanctuary, but they take for granted, can folks get up to the chancel? And is there a way to make that possible? So ideally that ADA would include not just your bathrooms and getting in and out of the church, getting to different floors of the building, but also including your worship space. How accessible is it? Fair is most of the property is ADA accessible, worship main areas, some hallways, classrooms, and bathrooms, maybe not fully ADA accessible. And poor would be, no, we are living in the dark ages and we have not brought our properties up to that standard to make it easy for folks to get around. You want to be thinking about fire safety as well. Um, and thinking about working with your local fire inspector and just having awareness, working with your insurance company as well. They can give you best practices. Um, and they can help you think about all different aspects of your property and things that incrementally you can do to improve the property for the use of all folks, right? But in terms of fire safety, we would mark it good if it seems safe based on current system in the building. The fire emergency exit signs are maintained and have posted exit plans. Fair would be unsure of property fire emergency systems, and poor would be there are known issues with our fire emergency system, and we receive code violations and warnings from the local municipality. We really want to note that it really depends on your local city, county, and state regulations. Um, and we recommend that you have fire safety plans in place. And if you have further questions, like I said, call your local service provider, reach out to your insurance company because they're glad to talk to you about that. Because if they can help reduce any risks, that's good for them, that's good for you. And who does the price tier use for an insurance provider?
The insurance board.
Insurance board. Yeah, I worked with them in Lake Erie Presbyterian too. I love them. I'm most familiar with them, and so I know that they'll come out and work with folks. But I've also seen other insurance companies do that as well, and they're glad to be a resource with you. And when you're being proactive, they even enjoy working with you more. So keep that in mind. Also, something to be thinking about. This has nothing to do with fire safety, but energy efficiency. You might invite someone to come out and do an energy efficiency audit for you. I know at the Warren Church, I had someone who did it for free because they were a friend and that was their specialty. And they came to visit when I was doing premarital counseling and they gave me an hour walking through the building and noted all different things we could do. But some of the most basic, just for energy efficiency, was converting our exit signs to LED.
Mm.
And it wasn't a very expensive shift, but something that saved us money and also meant the way we had them set up that they would work even in power outages, so even more useful for folks. Next big thing, other than HVAC, is the roof, and we all cringe a little bit, right? Roofs can be very expensive. My colleague Olanda Carr, he has a slate roof on his church, and he will tell you the woes of that maintenance and keeping it up. Um, so it really depends on what kind of roof type you have. You know, is it an asphalt shingle? Is it slate? Do you have a tile roof? A big thing at the church I served in Warren is we had a tile roof. The church was built in 1897, but it wasn't until I arrived in 2010 that they added ice dogs. They're called other things too, but essentially, when you have ice and snow build up, just starts to melt a little bit with that tile roof, you could have it come down in a big clump of ice and take someone out. The ice dogs break it up. So it's thinking about the overall condition of your roof, but also other accoutrements that might help in reducing risks as well. So as you look at your roof, we'd say good is less than 10 years old. Any known leaks have been repaired. You're doing yearly roof maintenance and inspection. Um, Now, again, if you have a slate roof, if you have a tin roof, if you have a tile roof, they last a lot longer than 10 years. Good is when we're talking 10 years here, we're talking about an asphalt roof. Maybe you have other parts of your church building that, your main roof is one thing, but you have some flat roofs. Maybe it's got rubber on it or different things. So, it's going to be graded based on that type of roof. And you've got to be aware of all the different roofs we have, and what's the best way to maintain those. If your roof is between 10 and 20 years old, particularly if it is asphalt or rubber, we're going to say that's a fair roof. And you've addressed some minor repairs. And poor is really, particularly if we're talking asphalt and rubber again, the age is over 20 years old, you have debris on the roof, and you have major repairs or replacement is needed. That would give it a poor mark. But again, keep in mind if you've got the slate or the tile, it's going to be a different piece. And that's where you get to know your property and know the quality of it, the expected age duration that goes with it. That will help you classify a little better based on what you have.
And Ellie, I want to just add, if you have one of those types of roof like slate or tile, especially, the roof has been engineered for that particular kind of roofing surface, and you can't just replace it with the asphalt. You can't just go from slate to a modern kind of material without taking into account the difference in how it vents and the difference in how, everything underneath the roofing material works. I've known churches that shifted from slate to something more modern without taking that into account. It can twist your roof beams because the slate vents in a different way than the asphalt does and the heat builds up. So it's it's not a swappable material necessarily.
So really make sure that whoever you're using really is an expert and knows what they're working with. The church in Warren, I'm talking about because it's just my experience. Um, but the building was made of sandstone, and some folks thought it was a good idea to seal it so that it wouldn't corrode over time, have a little erosion. And the problem with that is sandstone is made to breathe. And so then we had a lot of problems with dampness and mold in the basement because that sandstone couldn't breathe. So good point, Cindy. So you've got to know what are these materials and talk to different people so that you're getting good, legitimate information about the various products, what your building is made out of. As you also look at your roof, look at, do you have gutters? What kind of condition are they in? Are those being maintained? So are they good, fair, or poor? Other things we think that are helpful for you to know is there deferred maintenance? Name it, be aware of it. Um, Put a plan together to navigate that. Um, you know, I would say healthy churches do a capital campaign every 10 years. And there are plenty of churches I work with across the region who have not done one in 30 years. That's really an opportunity um, to think about uh, what can we repair and what deferred maintenance can we take care of, but also how do we will this enhance our mission and ministry? What's the story we can tell around that? Um, and having our buildings in good repair to do the ministry that we intend with them, the story of the ministry is what is so key. So thinking about that, talking about that, advocating for that, so that you can really address some of these things. Um, you know, when visitors walk into your building, the first thing I learned this from a United Methodist years ago, the first thing visitors are going to look at are your bathrooms and your nursery. Now, some of our churches haven't had kids in them for 15 years. But if you have old, dirty toys, if you have cribs that are no longer legal to use with the rail that drops, you really need to get rid of it. And if you need to have a crib, put one that is compliant with today. Um, but even if you don't have kids there, if you have a nursery, you want those who do show up to know you're ready for them, right? So thinking about those things are important as well. Is there any water damage? I was with Brent at Calvary, and he was laughing at me. He's like, "Yeah," he told a session. Ellie said the first thing she does when she walks into a church building is she's looking up in all the corners, she's checking out the bathrooms. Um, maybe it's the work I do and that's what makes me notice, but I think your visitors notice those things too that you get so accustomed to, you just don't think about. You've been seeing it for months or years, and the longer it's there, the less you think about it. So make notations of that. What is the functional accessibility of the property in regards to its layout? Is there adequate classroom, office space, etc.? Or do you have an overabundance, right? Do you have too much space for the size of your congregation? Um, if you walk into a sanctuary and it's only 40% full, it feels empty. Now, if you walk into a sanctuary and it's 80% full, it feels too full, and that's when you need to go to an additional service, right? But we need to think about these things. And it may be trying to live with the space we're in. If really we have 40% or less occupancy in our sanctuary, now you can do this if you have 80% occupancy, but it may be taking some pews out, creating a prayer ground, finding other useful ways um, to shift seating capacity and whatnot, so it doesn't feel so empty. So there are some things you can think about there too. Do you have cell towers or solar panels present? If so, is that a lease? What's the term of the lease? Anything else you need to know about with that? Um, are there any landscaping, maintenance, or drainage issues? I'd also add, we have a few churches. I don't think about it necessarily in Delaware, but we have churches in some areas that have sold their air rights, right? Or have 100-year leases on that. So being aware of what those are, having that documentation, and really, I think it's great to review these things with your session at least every 3 years. That way, people know what's going on. It's just not the property committee. It's just good to talk about this, right? Are there any landscaping maintenance or drainage issues? Um, and then common next steps is you might consider having an engineering assessment. A property appraisal, it's just good to know the value of your property, right? Are there local government or zoning restrictions? We have a lot of churches who are leasing out some of their property. Any long-term leases, standard book of orders, anything over a year. What do you do in that presbytery, in your presbytery, Cindy?
Um, we mostly, if it's over 5 years, if it's
Over
longer than
5 years.
5 years, the trustees have to approve it.
That's your long-term lease. Okay. And then anything time there is another worshiping community coming in, Book of Order standard is that the trustees have to approve that because they have the oversight of ministry across the region. So you want to be in conversation with um, the trustees, and they can also give you good information as you're thinking about, oh, even if it's not a long-term lease, but you're thinking about what do we need to have in a lease if we're renting out our property. Um, Talk to the trustees. They have experience. They can talk to you about that. I also have some good models from other presbyteries. I'm always glad to share. But when you're leasing out your property, it's important. Uh, to know also, I have some churches who've said, oh, we're going to sell a portion of our property because we have all this acreage we're not using. Or maybe we're going to be working with the foster system for housing for kids coming out of the foster system, young adults who are doing that. Maybe we're looking at housing issues in our community, and we know we have space that whether we retain ownership of that or whether we're selling the property to a developer to have affordable housing. It's important to know those local government and zoning restrictions. And it never hurts to talk to a real estate expert. I would say you don't have to have a property appraisal, but it's good to talk to a realtor just to have an idea of what's the realtor's estimate of value, right? Um, and that can be just helpful to know what's this property worth? what could it sell for, which is a little bit different than its appraised value, right? Which is also a little different than what you'd insure it for, which usually is a great deal more. Um, Other things to be thinking about is I think it's always good for churches to do a title search and just know, and then have it recorded in the session minutes uh, every couple of years so you can find it easily. But, are there any revisionary clauses with this property? If we ever did look to sell it or do something different with it, split it up, um, you know, what limits might we have, just so we know what we can do with our property, right? And the property is held in trust for the larger church. Do you have any Southern churches who have opted out, Cindy, there in that
Not that
Presbyterian?
I'm
Okay.
aware of, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were you going
And
to say there?
Marge has a question.
Oh, yes, Marge.
Well, I'm just wondering why the individual church would be doing the property assessment or um, options for selling or whatever, because we don't own the church, do we?
So as
You
long
own
as
the
your
church.
church continues to exist, there are congregations who will say, for instance, the church I grew up in was a 900 member congregation. Their property takes up half a city block. Um, they now have 30 in worship. They can't maintain it. Downsizing would be a good thing if they want to be able to continue in ministry. Other churches might say, golly, we've outgrown our space, or the space we have just has so much deferred maintenance. We would be better off selling this campus and buying another or renting a space, right? And so churches can imagine that, and session can
But
move to do that.
churches can't sell their property, can they?
Oh, with approval from the presbytery. So you would work very closely with the presbytery. But as long as you are a continuing Peace USA congregation and you're using it for ministry, right? Presbyteries will say yes as if it's a good plan and it's going to help you flourish in ministry.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right.
So, but that's a great question, Marge, because I think a lot of people think what you're saying, right? So the property is held in trust for the denomination, and it's really the presbytery who is going to approve it. But even if your session says, we'd like to sell this property, this is our plan, this is how it'll enable us to live into mission. I'm working with another church. That is a former 3,000 member church, 1,000 members now. Their building was built in the 50s, um, but the builds in the 50s aren't like the builds in the 1890s, right? They don't last forever. And so this particular congregation is saying, yeah, the best decision, the best use of our funds to be good stewards, to help us grow as a congregation is figuring out either how we can redevelop this or sell it and move to another place that will allow us to be healthier, stronger, sustainable. And when congregations, when sessions have the vision for that, um, then a presbytery will say, yes, we endorse you. Um, but it's good to know, those basic things like, are there revisionary clauses? I can't tell you how many churches who have discovered that the property goes back to a family that had originally donated some acreage, and it might not be the whole property, it might be half the parcel, but you gotta know that to be informed to make wise decisions. Yeah. Do you have anything you'd add, Cindy?
It comes down to that ministry plan. Not in this presbytery, but in previous presbyteries I've served, there have been sessions that wanted to sell the property, but they weren't going to do anything different. They were going to continue with the same ministry model. They didn't have a plan for outreach. They didn't have a plan. In one case, there were some badly broken relationships in the community, and they were not willing to do anything to repair those relationships. And we said, you're just wanting more money to continue to do what you're doing, and we won't approve that. Um, so if there's a plan for that revitalized ministry, for flourishing, if there's a clear sense of, if we do this, then it will allow us to do these other things instead, I would totally support that with the trustees. But if it's just for another 5 years of doing what you're doing, we we can end it, sooner than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's good to know that information. And anytime you would do that, session can vote to sell, presbytery can approve it. It still has to go back to the congregation in the end for a final vote. You don't sell property without getting the approval of the congregation as well. So it's really a three-tiered decision when you're doing that. Resources I really want to lift up to you is reach out to the presbytery, to Cindy and the trustees. You can call upon me and community partners. And just to close with this little passage from Matthew chapter 16, verses 18. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And we see all sorts of things with our churches and their buildings. Um, you know, really, when it comes down to it, it's stunning. If we look back 100 years ago, churches weren't afraid to say, this building isn't working for us, and weren't afraid to move or tear down and rebuild. And so I would say, don't rule it out. But also, if you are going to be here long term, we want this property to work for you, to be sustainable. And there are a lot of churches who will consider, we have all this unused space. When you look through the many hours this building sits here through the week, that it could be of use in the community, and it could reduce our occupancy costs if we rent out a portion. When you're doing that, you just want to be considering, is it to another nonprofit? Um, will we have to pay tax on unrelated business income? If you have a manse, if it's a church employee living there, you're not gonna pay any taxes on it. You're renting out to someone else, depending on your uh, local government, you may or may have that on the tax roll. In Pennsylvania, uh, you still have to pay property taxes on manse. So in PA, it doesn't make a difference. I don't know how it is there in Delaware. But then also, if you are going to rent to a for-profit business, um, your local government might come back and say, a portion of your property is going off the tax roll because it's been used for profit, not nonprofit. Now, Broadway Presbyterian Church in New York City, they have a huge building right next to their sanctuary building that they rent out to Starbucks. And for them, it is worth it to pay taxes on that building because they have so much income coming in from that lease. So you just want to be informed whenever you are engaging in relationships. If you're leasing, you want to make sure to the organization or persons that they have the capacity. You want to do a check to make sure that they can afford to pay it. But you also want to make sure that they are insured and provide you a certificate of insurance. So there are a lot of different things that it's good to be aware of and know about with your property. But if nothing else with this checklist, I hope it helps you really observe what kind of deferred maintenance might we have? What do we need to work on? And, sometimes it seems like it is impossible to address it. How do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. So, Marge, do you have another question?
I do. You mentioned the church in New York with the Starbucks. So how does that work with people that make a pledge or a donation to the church? Is
What do you
that,
mean? Unpack that question for me so I can
well,
understand.
part of the church is taxed and part of it isn't. And so how do you designate that for people that are making donations?
The people making donations to the church are making a donation to the not-for-profit organization. So those
But
would be
but
tax deductible.
how do you designate that? How do people, how does that get clarified for the individual?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the same way. So churches who use our online giving, is it fee for service, right? Sometimes people will pay the church because they're doing a book study or there's a rummage sale, right? You cannot get a charitable deduction for buying something from the rummage sale. You cannot get a charitable deduction for the Easter lilies you buy and take with you. If they're being donated to those who are in the hospital or nursing homes and you're not getting them, it's a charitable deduction. But that's where the church is keeping track of that.
Mhm.
And so they can issue a receipt if it's non-charitable. But as long as it's charitable for the mission and ministry, they're providing you your annual statement and perhaps even a quarterly statement so you can see where you are in terms of your giving.
And I would
Does that make
say,
sense?
yeah, in terms of the particular church that Ellie mentioned in New York City, she said that it's a whole separate building. And so there's a separation there. What they're renting to a for-profit entity and business, that should be covering all the expenses of running that building. So none of the church donations should be going to that. If you're renting to a for-profit group, you should be sure that that's covering all the expenses of providing space, and that includes utilities, insurance, wear and tear, maintenance,
Right.
yeah, all of that stuff. So a for-profit renter, all that has to be covered by them, and that helps keep it clear too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I would say most churches, though, aren't going to entertain a for-profit runner because they don't want to risk um, the unrelated business income,
Hmm.
nor or they're willing to pay the taxes on that. But they also really don't want to risk the property going off back onto the tax roll.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd
Mhm.
say in terms of leasing or renting space is that we are faith organizations and we have very particular values and mission statements. And something I encourage our sessions to think carefully about is if you are going to share space with another organization, can they affirm your values? Like I know Concord is open and affirming, is very serious about welcome to the LGBTQIA plus community. I don't think you should consider sharing space with, for example, another worshiping community that would not welcome the queer community in the same way. So also just thinking about these are our values, this is our mission, and if we're going to share space, it's going to be with organizations that can support that value and mission.
And it's best for the session to be able to articulate that. Presbyterian will help you think about that. But if it really is antithetical to who you are, Presbyterian may say, we're not going to approve this long-term lease. But even if it's a short-term lease, it may not be wise. Um, it doesn't, some people are capitalists out there and they're like, any money is good money. But no, what is it really?
Yeah.
Are we stabbing ourselves in the back by receiving that? Are we, um, saying it out of one side of our mouth, we believe this, but then the other side of our mouth, because we're getting the money off of it, we're willing to have our work not just not affirmed, but
Yeah.
spoken against, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
So good
before we
point.
wrap, I want to mention two things. First of all, one of the things the Presbytery trustees are doing, which is relatively new, is coming alongside churches that are caring for their buildings. And the way we're doing that is by uh, entering into conversations with a session about a loan that can be converted to a grant. So, for instance, Ellie talked about fire suppression systems. First Presbyterian in Milford, their insurance company said if you don't put in an up-to-date fire suppression system, we're dropping you and you won't get insured by anyone. That their initial bid was like $80,000, and that's a small church, vital ministry, but they're like, we can't afford this. They came to the trustees. We helped them get some other bids, so we also supported them in getting some additional bids, and then they ended up with something that was, I think, at least $20,000 less. But what we said is, we will give you a loan for the full amount. We'll say 80,000. Anything you raise up to 40,000 will convert to a grant. So if you raise 20,000, we'll convert 20,000 to a grant, which would then give you 40,000 out of that loan. The remaining 40,000 becomes a low interest loan. We set terms based on a church's ability to meet them. If you raise half of the loan amount, 40,000, we'll forgive the other half. We'll make the other half of that loan a grant. And they were able to meet it with like I said, they got a better bid. We did the same thing with Olivet Presbyterian in Glasgow to help them take care of their parking lot. And so that's something, up to a certain amount. We're not gonna come alongside $1 million or even $500,000. I think the cap will probably be 100,000 or less. But this is one of the ways the presbytery is living into the trust clause with our churches, because we know building maintenance can be expensive, and if there is a way that we can support that stewardship of the property, we want to do it. And so that's something we're doing in Newcastle. And the second thing I wanted to mention is,
Before you go on,
yeah,
how long does that process take?
it depends. Like the trustees can turn it around pretty fast if you've got the bids. If you can show, hey, we did several bids, this is the one that meets our need the most. Uh, the trustees can turn it around fast, and then we usually put kind of a timeline, like raising of the matching funds to match a grant. Um, it has to be done within 6 years, 6 years, 6 months to a year. It's not, forever.
Mhm.
But yeah, we've been able to turn that around pretty fast.
Okay,
And
thanks.
I want to add, if a church is looking to raise $150,000 or less, you come to the Presbyterian Foundation website to find out about capital campaigns. Anything more than that, we typically refer out to those who specialize in capital campaigns. But 150,000 or less, Olanda Carr and myself will work with them at no cost to the church. With mini campaigns, we can help you raise that. So if you're going to the presbytery to do this, give me a ring, and we'll get on a call with Atlanta within 2 weeks' time and start getting a plan together to
Yeah.
help you.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to mention is one of the other sister agencies, the Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program, has recently hired Carl Horton as a mission development officer, specifically focusing on helping churches utilize property for affordable housing and social impact initiatives. So uh, he's new in the position, so he's getting his resources pulled together. But for churches that have property and want to think about what are the possibilities, we have a resource that's free to reach out to. Woohoo! And as the presbytery, we've already reached out to Carl because of the property we have on Route 1 down in Rehoboth. There's a big parcel of land, and we want to explore putting affordable housing on that, especially in that area where there's so
Huge.
little affordable housing. And so we've
Yeah.
reached out to Carl to start that conversation. So that's another resource in terms of, hey, if we're assessing our property and we have more than we can do with, there are people better equipped to help you with those conversations than I am. I'm not the person to help you with that conversation, but I'll point you in the right direction.
And Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program is also wonderful if you're looking to do energy efficiency. Maybe you can get a grant or a loan from the Presbytery, but if it exceeds what the Presbytery can do, look to Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program. Actually, we partner with them, and their energy efficiency loans have a lower percentage rate attached to them because of some funding we've provided through the foundation. But say you're looking to do a new build as well. Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program. They exist to provide loans for, bricks and mortar for churches.
Yeah, it's a great program. And we're at our hour. Woohoo! So
Thank
Ellie
you so
is
much.
going to send me the presentation, but also the checklist.
Mhm.
And Donna works her magic and posts it. Uh, this video will be up on YouTube tomorrow on the Presbytery's YouTube channel, and then we'll attach the handouts as well. Next month, May, May 21st, our third Thursday training will be featuring our Board of Pensions. I forget what her title is. It's not Ministry Relations Officer, it's not liaison. She's she's our person. Carrie Mitchell is going to talk about some of the new programs the Board of Pensions is offering to support, especially pastors and congregations. So for any of our financial folks or our pastors, next month's third Thursday will be really helpful for them. Yeah.
And you and I go back to regional rep is what they were called years ago. And so
Yeah,
spitting out what they've been for the last 10
I
shouldn't be so hard, but
know.
it is.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't spit it up for you either.
Oh, all
But
right. Well,
essentially, she's your regional rep. And
yeah,
so
she's
Carrie
our
will be
person.
really useful. Mhm.
I just said talk to our person at the board. So thank you, Ellie. Thank you so very much. Really, really appreciate your time today and all of the resources. Really fantastic.
My pleasure. And I hope you folks have a great evening and feel free to call me if I can be of resource.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.